In the grim darkness of the far future, where the galaxy churns in perpetual war, unity is a concept few can afford to entertain. The 41st millennium is a brutal era, defined by mistrust, violence, and the eternal clash of ideologies and survival instincts. Across the void, countless species, collectively labeled as Xenos by the Imperium of man, struggle not only against humanity's oppressive hand, but also against one another. Each faction, driven by its own motivations, seeks to carve out its destiny in an unforgiving cosmos. The galaxy itself is vast, its countless star systems harboring civilizations both ancient and nascent. From the proud Eldar, heirs to a lost empire, to the voracious Tyranids, whose hunger knows no bounds, the variety of alien life is as infinite as the stars themselves. Yet, for all their differences, they share a singular reality. They are seen as the enemies of mankind. The Imperium of man, bloated and fractious, wages an unyielding crusade to dominate or annihilate all who stand against it. This doctrine of xenophobia has shaped the very foundation of human existence for millennia, leaving little room for peace or diplomacy. The seeds of division among the Xenos species run deep. Historical grievances, incompatible philosophies, and outright biological imperatives often make the idea of a united Xenos front seem laughable. Many of these species are predators by nature, vying for dominance in an ecosystem that spans the galaxy. Cooperation, where it exists, is tenuous and short-lived, shattered by the inevitable clash of priorities. The galaxy's history is littered with broken alliances and bitter betrayals, fueling the narrative that true unity among these disparate factions is impossible. And yet, one cannot ignore the tantalizing question: what if they did unite? What force could compel these rivals, adversaries, and enemies to set aside their differences? What would such a coalition look like, and how would the balance of power in the galaxy shift? The very idea is as much a thought experiment as it is a nightmare for the Imperium. A united Xenos alliance would represent a threat unlike any other, a coalition with the potential to topple even the mightiest of empires. In exploring this scenario, one must suspend disbelief and consider the impossible. The forces that drive these species apart would need to be overshadowed by a cause greater than their individual ambitions. The power struggles that define the galaxy would need to shift, forging a moment of unprecedented opportunity. The sheer logistics of such a union, communication, strategy, and shared resources would require overcoming obstacles both monumental and terrifying. As the galaxy teeters on the edge of ruin, the thought of a united Xenos front casts a long shadow. It is a specter that haunts the dreams of humanity's leaders, and an idea that flickers in the minds of visionaries among the alien species. It is the ultimate what if, a scenario that promises either salvation or obliteration for all who dwell in the stars. Thus begins our journey into the unthinkable, a world where the Xenos unite. Prepare to delve into the key players, the circumstances that could make such unity possible, and the consequences of a galaxy transformed by an alliance that defies all odds. The galaxy is home to a staggering variety of alien species, each with unique traits, ideologies, and ambitions. These Xenos factions, often defined by their inability or unwillingness to cooperate, stand as testaments to the chaos of the universe. Yet, their potential roles in a hypothetical alliance offer insight into how such a union could form and the tensions it would carry. The Eldar, or Eldari, are an ancient and enigmatic species, once rulers of the galaxy before the fall of their empire. Their fragmented remnants include the stoic Asuriani, the sadistic Drukhari, and the outcast Corsairs. Each faction operates independently, but their shared heritage and psychic prowess make them natural candidates for leadership in any Xenos coalition. While their arrogance and disdain for lesser species often isolate them, desperation could push them to ally with others, especially if it serves their goal of staving off extinction. The Orcs, on the other hand, are a seemingly unlikely candidate for any formal alliance. These brutish and anarchic creatures thrive on conflict and chaos, often turning on each other as eagerly as on their enemies. However, their genetic predisposition for following a strong leader hints at a possibility. Under the right circumstances, a war boss of unprecedented cunning and strength could rally them behind a larger cause. The Orcs' sheer numbers and destructive potential would make them an invaluable asset in any united Xenos front, though maintaining their loyalty would be a near impossible task. The Tyranids, a hive-minded swarm driven by an insatiable hunger, present a unique challenge. Cooperation is antithetical to their very nature, as they view all other life as resources to consume and assimilate. However, the existence of splinter fleets and isolated hive tendrils suggests a potential for manipulation. If some external force could alter or control their behavior, the Tyranids could become an unstoppable force in a larger alliance, albeit one that would constantly threaten to consume its own allies. The Tau Empire, with their ethos of the greater good, stand out as perhaps the most naturally inclined towards unity. Their expansionist ideology seeks to bring other species under their banner, offering integration and cooperation in exchange for submission to their vision. While their methods can be coercive, the Tau have successfully incorporated various alien species into their empire, from the loyal Kroot to the technologically advanced Vespid. Their structured and diplomatic approach positions them as a potential cornerstone of any Xenos coalition, provided they can temper their tendency to dominate rather than collaborate. The Necrons, ancient beings of living metal, embody a stark contrast to the Tau's idealism. Driven by cold logic and a desire to reclaim their lost empire, the Necrons are often seen as aloof and isolationist. However, their advanced technology and disdain for the chaos of the galaxy could position them as reluctant allies. Some Necron dynasties have shown a willingness to negotiate with other species when it aligns with their goals, though their arrogance and long-standing enmity with many factions make them a difficult partner. The Genstealer cults, insidious infiltrators who sow discord in preparation for the Tyranids' arrival, occupy a more subversive role. While their ultimate allegiance lies with the hive fleets, their ability to manipulate and co-opt other species could be a powerful tool in uniting disparate factions. However, their presence would be a double-edged sword, as their true motives would remain a constant threat to any alliance. The Hrud, often overlooked in galactic affairs, are a nomadic species with a peculiar relationship to time and decay. Their ability to disrupt and destabilize environments could serve as a potent weapon in a united front. However, their elusive and secretive nature makes them difficult to incorporate into any formal structure. The Kroot, known for their mercenary tendencies and adaptability, are another species with potential as intermediaries in a Xenos alliance. Their willingness to work alongside others for the right price or cause makes them versatile allies, though their loyalty is often fleeting and dependent on circumstance. The Rakgol, a savage and barbaric species, thrive on destruction and chaos, making them unlikely candidates for collaboration. However, their aggression and willingness to engage in brutal warfare could be channeled under a unifying force, provided their bloodlust is directed at a common enemy. The Quorl, an insectoid species with a hive mentality, present a more enigmatic option. Their isolationism and insular society make them difficult to engage, but their capacity for large-scale coordination and resource management could prove invaluable in an alliance. Each of these factions brings unique strengths and weaknesses to the table. Some, like the Tau and Kroot, are predisposed to cooperation, while others, like the Tyranids and Rakgol, would require extraordinary circumstances to align with others. The success of any Xenos coalition would depend on overcoming deep-seated rivalries and finding a unifying force capable of balancing these disparate elements. This diversity, both a strength and a weakness, defines the challenge of imagining a galaxy where the Xenos unite. The catalyst for any unprecedented alliance among the Xenos species of the galaxy must stem from a situation so dire, so universally threatening, that it eclipses centuries of conflict, mistrust, and isolation. Such a moment would not arise from mere convenience or opportunity. It would need to force even the most antagonistic factions to reassess their survival strategies. The unifying factor would likely emerge as a combination of external pressure, shared vulnerability, and the realization of mutual benefit in the face of annihilation. The galaxy is not static. The constant ebb and flow of power, war, and ambition often mask the growing fractures beneath the surface. One plausible cause for Xenos unity could be the intensification of the Imperium of man's crusade against alien life. Driven by desperation, xenophobia, or renewed strength, the Imperium might launch a galaxy-wide campaign of unprecedented scale, targeting every non-human civilization with unparalleled ferocity. This could leave individual Xenos factions isolated and unable to withstand the combined might of the Imperium's war machine. Faced with extinction, even the most solitary of species could be forced to reevaluate their stance on collaboration. Another possible trigger lies in the unpredictable nature of the galaxy itself. The warp, with its chaotic and malevolent influence, has been a persistent source of instability for millennia. A cataclysmic warp incursion, one that spills into real space on an unimaginable scale, could devastate both human and alien civilizations alike. Unlike previous incursions, this event might not discriminate between its victims, driving home the reality that survival depends on pooling resources, intelligence, and strength. The shared experience of resisting such a threat could serve as the initial step toward a fragile but necessary cooperation. A new existential threat could also emerge from the depths of the galaxy, such as an external force that transcends the current power dynamics. Perhaps a new Tyranid hive fleet, larger and more adaptive than any previously encountered, enters the galaxy with the potential to consume everything in its path. This could even extend to a scenario where Tyranid splinter fleets themselves are under threat, driving them to cooperate, however briefly, with other Xenos factions to survive. The urgency of stopping such an overwhelming force could override centuries of enmity and mistrust. Similarly, a technological breakthrough or ancient artifact could serve as the foundation for unity. In the galaxy's uncharted territories, countless relics of ancient civilizations lie dormant, their power often unknown. The discovery of such an artifact, one with the ability to tip the balance of power or provide an unparalleled advantage in combating the galaxy's many dangers, could act as a rallying point. The artifact might require cooperation to unlock its full potential, forcing factions to set aside differences long enough to achieve a shared goal. Economic necessity could also play a role. Resources across the galaxy are finite, and competition for them often fuels conflict. A sudden depletion of critical resources, be it promethium, rare minerals, or access to habitable worlds, might drive Xenos factions to seek alliances to ensure mutual survival. This could be particularly relevant in regions of the galaxy where human expansion has already stripped the area of viable resources, leaving alien species with no choice but to consolidate their efforts. In addition, the increasing influence of rogue elements within various factions could act as a precursor to unity. These elements might see the benefits of cooperation, even if their governments or leaders do not. Smaller coalitions or splinter groups could begin forming alliances on the fringes of galactic society, proving that collaboration is possible and gradually influencing larger factions to follow suit. This bottom-up approach to unity could provide the foundation for a broader movement. Lastly, the role of emergent leadership or visionaries cannot be understated. While not tied to any specific individual, the presence of leaders capable of transcending traditional rivalries could act as the linchpin for Xenos unity. These figures would need to inspire trust and demonstrate a level of pragmatism and foresight rarely seen in the galaxy. Whether through charisma, cunning, or sheer force of will, such leadership could create an environment where collaboration becomes not only possible, but essential. The convergence of these factors, overwhelming external threats, resource scarcity, economic necessity, emergent leadership, and shared survival imperatives could create the conditions for an unprecedented Xenos alliance. This would not be a natural evolution, but a desperate response to circumstances so extreme that they leave no other viable option. The fragile unity that emerges from such conditions would be riddled with tension, but it could mark the beginning of a new chapter in the galaxy's history. The formation of a unified Xenos front would be a process marked by gradual, often reluctant steps, each fraught with tension and compromise. The initial actions following the alliance's formation would focus on establishing leadership, defining common goals, and addressing the logistical challenges of coordinating disparate species with conflicting interests and philosophies. These steps would set the stage for a transformative series of events across the galaxy. Leadership of such a coalition would be the most pressing and contentious issue. The Tau Empire, with its structured and inclusive ideology of the greater good, would likely position itself as the natural choice to lead. Their existing framework for integrating diverse species under a shared purpose would provide a template for larger-scale cooperation. However, their tendency to impose their will might alienate factions such as the Eldar or Necrons, who would demand greater autonomy. To mitigate this, the leadership might adopt a council-based approach, with representatives from major factions holding equal influence. This would require a delicate balance to prevent dominance by any single group, fostering a fragile but functional structure. The Eldar would push for a leadership role as well, leveraging their ancient wisdom and advanced psychic abilities. However, their superiority complex and history of isolation would likely make them a polarizing choice. A compromise might emerge wherein the Eldar take on an advisory role, offering strategic insights while allowing other factions to lead military or logistical efforts. The Necrons, meanwhile, might demand recognition as equals, insisting on a degree of control commensurate with their technological superiority. Their participation would be contingent on promises of neutrality in conflicts that do not directly threaten the coalition. Once leadership is established, the alliance would need to define its priorities. The immediate goal would likely be survival, focusing on neutralizing the existential threats that catalyze the alliance. A coordinated military campaign would be launched, targeting shared enemies such as the Imperium of Man or rampaging Tyranid hive fleets. Tactical objectives would be divided based on each faction's strengths. Orcs would spearhead brutal ground assaults, Tau and Eldar forces would handle precision strikes, and Necrons would use their technology to disrupt enemy infrastructure. The Tyranids, if included through manipulated splinter fleets, would be directed towards overwhelming key targets with their biomass-driven swarms. The logistical challenges of such a campaign would be immense. The diverse needs of each faction, ranging from the Orcs' chaotic supply chains to the Necrons' requirement for advanced materials, would necessitate a centralized command structure capable of managing resources effectively. This would likely involve a neutral third party, such as the Kroot or another mercenary species, acting as intermediaries to ensure fair distribution and prevent disputes. Communication protocols would also need to be standardized, potentially relying on the Tau's advanced technology or the Eldar's psychic networks to coordinate operations across vast distances. The Alliance would also need to address internal dissent. Not all members would be fully committed to the cause, with some factions viewing the coalition as a temporary convenience rather than a long-term partnership. To prevent fragmentation, the leadership would likely establish a system of checks and balances, ensuring that no single faction could act unilaterally to the detriment of the others. This might include a charter outlining shared goals and penalties for violations, enforced by a joint task force with representatives from each faction. As the initial military campaigns unfold, the coalition would begin to consolidate its power. Strategic victories would bolster morale and attract smaller factions or rogue elements to join the cause. The success of these operations would depend on the ability to adapt tactics to the unique capabilities of each faction. For instance, Eldar seers might predict enemy movements, while Necron cryptomancers devise countermeasures to disrupt opposing technology. Orc warbands, spurred on by the promise of larger battles, could be directed towards high-risk operations that require brute force. The ideological underpinnings of the coalition would also need to evolve. Initially formed out of necessity, the alliance would face increasing pressure to define its long-term purpose. While survival would remain the immediate priority, factions like the Tau would push for broader objectives, such as creating a stable, multi-species order in the galaxy. This would conflict with the goals of more individualistic factions, such as the Drukhari, who might prioritize their own interests over collective well-being. Resolving these ideological clashes would be critical to maintaining unity. As the coalition gains momentum, it would likely turn its attention to securing key regions of the galaxy. This might include reclaiming ancient strongholds, establishing new colonies, or seizing critical resources from rival factions. These actions would serve both practical and symbolic purposes, demonstrating the Alliance's strength while laying the groundwork for a more permanent presence. Efforts would also be made to recruit neutral or unaffiliated species, using a combination of diplomacy, coercion, and displays of power to bring them into the fold. Despite these advances, the Alliance would remain vulnerable to internal and external threats. Rogue factions within the coalition might exploit the situation for personal gain, undermining trust and cohesion. External enemies, particularly the Imperium of Man, would intensify their efforts to destabilize the Alliance through espionage, propaganda, and targeted attacks. To counter this, the leadership would need to implement stringent security measures and foster a sense of shared identity among the coalition's members. In time, the Alliance might achieve a level of stability that allows it to consider more ambitious goals. This could include establishing a unified governance structure, codifying laws and policies to regulate interfaction relations, and developing shared technologies to enhance collective capabilities. These efforts would mark the transition from a temporary coalition to a more permanent political entity, reshaping the galaxy's power dynamics and challenging the dominance of the Imperium and other major players. The turning point for the Xenos Alliance comes when their survival-driven coalition evolves into an aggressive force with a unified purpose, dismantling the Imperium of Man. This decision is not made lightly, but as victories pile up and the Alliance consolidates power, it becomes clear that coexistence is no longer an option. The Imperium's relentless xenophobia and refusal to negotiate have left no room for diplomacy. The Xenos factions, weary of being hunted and driven to the fringes of the galaxy, collectively decide to strike at the very heart of humanity's empire. The Alliance identifies a dual-pronged strategy, destabilizing the Imperium's infrastructure while waging full-scale war against its military forces. This shift in focus marks a critical change in the galactic balance of power. No longer content with mere survival, the Xenos Alliance aims to dismantle the very system that has oppressed them for millennia. This moment cements the coalition as more than a temporary union. It becomes an existential threat to the Imperium and a potential reshaper of the galaxy's future. The first major objective in this campaign is Terra itself. The Xenos Alliance understands that humanity's strength lies not only in its massive armies, but in its centralized governance and spiritual unity. By targeting the cradle of human civilization and the symbolic heart of the Imperium, the Alliance seeks to undermine the morale of its enemy and shatter its leadership. However, they also recognize that a direct assault on Terra is not immediately feasible. Instead, they begin by systematically dismantling the surrounding systems, isolating Terra and cutting off its support lines. This strategy leads to a critical escalation, the battle for the Segmentum Solar. The Xenos Alliance, leveraging their collective strengths, launches a coordinated offensive against the Imperium's core worlds. The Eldar, with their superior foresight and precision, spearhead strikes against key communication hubs and supply depots, leaving Imperial fleets disoriented and vulnerable. Orc warbands, emboldened by the scale of the conflict, swarm planetary defenses in overwhelming numbers. Meanwhile, The Necrons deploy their advanced technology to disable planetary void shields and disrupt Imperial infrastructure, creating opportunities for other factions to exploit. The Imperium, despite its vast resources, struggles to respond to the sheer diversity of tactics employed by the Alliance. Where it counters with brute force, the Eldar evade and strike from the shadows. Where it prepares for conventional warfare, the Tyranids adapt and overwhelm with unpredictable ferocity. This multifaceted approach strains the Imperium's command structure, forcing its leaders to stretch their forces thin across multiple fronts. As the campaign progresses, the Xenos Alliance faces its own critical decision, whether to destroy Terra outright or subjugate it as a symbol of their dominance. This debate reveals growing fractures within the Coalition. The Tau advocate for a strategy of assimilation, envisioning a galaxy where humanity is brought under the rule of the greater good. The Orcs, by contrast, favor total annihilation, driven by their insatiable lust for battle. The Necrons, pragmatic and calculating, argue for a surgical strike to decapitate the Imperium's leadership, leaving its remnants to collapse under their own weight. Ultimately, the Coalition settles on a compromise, a campaign to dismantle Terra's defenses and render it powerless without necessarily annihilating its population. This decision reflects the precarious unity of the Alliance, as each faction seeks to balance its own goals with the collective objective. It also underscores the challenge of maintaining cohesion in the face of such monumental stakes. The Imperium, though battered, refuses to fall without a fight. Humanity's resilience, born of millennia of struggle, proves a formidable obstacle. The defenders of Terra rally under a banner of desperation, drawing on ancient reserves of strength and ingenuity. The resulting conflict, known as the Siege of Terra Reborn, becomes a defining moment in galactic history. It is here that the fate of the Imperium, and perhaps the entire galaxy, will be decided. While the Xenos Alliance boasts a level of coordination and strategic depth never before seen, humanity's sheer numbers and indomitable will make the outcome far from certain. Both sides possess unique advantages: the Alliance's diversity and adaptability versus the Imperium's entrenched infrastructure and fanatical determination. The conflict escalates into a war of attrition with no clear victor in sight. This turning point marks a fundamental shift in the galaxy's trajectory. The Xenos Alliance has proven that unity is not only possible but powerful, challenging the Imperium's long-standing dominance. However, the cost of this unity is high, and the cracks within the Coalition begin to show as the war drags on. Each victory brings the Alliance closer to its goal, but also heightens the tension between its member factions. In this moment of unprecedented cooperation, the seeds of future conflict are already being sown, ensuring that the galaxy will remain a place of endless struggle, no matter who prevails. The immediate impact of the Xenos uniting, regardless of their eventual success or failure, reshapes the galaxy in profound and irreversible ways. The mere existence of such a coalition sends shockwaves through every corner of the galaxy, destabilizing long-established power structures and forcing every faction, human and alien alike, to reassess their strategies for survival and dominance. This unprecedented alliance changes not only the dynamics of warfare, but also the cultural and political landscape of the galaxy, leaving no corner untouched. If the Xenos Alliance emerges victorious, their triumph over the Imperium ushers in a new era of galactic governance, one built on tenuous cooperation and deep-seated distrust among its members. The collapse of the Imperium would leave vast swaths of territory ungoverned, creating a power vacuum that the Alliance must fill. However, the diverse priorities of the Coalition's factions quickly become apparent as they compete for influence over these newly conquered regions. The Tau, with their emphasis on order and integration, would push to establish a centralized administration based on the principles of their greater good. They would likely attempt to convert humanity's scattered remnants into willing participants in this new system, offering them a place in exchange for compliance. The Eldar, meanwhile, would see this as an opportunity to reclaim lost territories and rebuild their fractured empire, prioritizing the restoration of their ancient dominion over collective governance. The Necrons, ever pragmatic, would focus on securing sites of strategic or technological importance, leveraging their influence to control critical resources and infrastructure. Humanity, though defeated, would not vanish entirely. Resistance movements would spring up across the galaxy, fueled by the Imperium's unyielding belief in its divine right to rule. These remnants of humanity would become a persistent thorn in the Alliance's side, conducting guerrilla campaigns and seeking to exploit the inevitable fractures within the Coalition. The Alliance would face the daunting challenge of maintaining unity while suppressing these insurgencies, forcing them to divert resources away from their broader goals. For the galaxy at large, a victorious Xenos alliance would signify the end of an era dominated by the Imperium's oppressive xenophobia. Trade routes would reopen, fostering an unprecedented exchange of technology, culture, and knowledge among the galaxy's diverse species. However, this newfound connectivity would also bring new challenges, as old rivalries and mistrust bubble to the surface. The Alliance's leaders would need to navigate these complexities carefully to avoid descending into chaos. If humanity ultimately prevails, the consequences for the Xenos Alliance would be equally significant. A crushing defeat would shatter the fragile bonds that held the Coalition together, driving its member factions back into isolation or mutual hostility. The Tau, disillusioned by the failure of their vision, might retreat to their empire to reassess their expansionist strategies. The Eldar would likely retreat into their craft worlds, their hopes for a new era of dominance dashed. The Orcs, ever resilient, would scatter across the galaxy, eager to find new conflicts to fuel their endless appetite for war. The Imperium, emboldened by its survival, would redouble its efforts to exterminate all traces of alien life. The lesson learned from the Alliance's temporary unity would drive humanity to adopt even more aggressive tactics, seeking to ensure that such a threat could never arise again. Entire star systems would be purged in the name of the Emperor as the Imperium tightens its grip on the galaxy. However, the cost of victory would be immense, leaving humanity weakened and vulnerable to internal strife. The aftermath of this conflict would also have far-reaching implications for the galaxy's smaller factions. Many would find themselves caught in the crossfire, their survival dependent on navigating the shifting tides of power. Mercenary species like the Kroot might thrive in the chaos, offering their services to the highest bidder, while others, like the Hrood or the Rock Gol, could find themselves targeted for annihilation by an emboldened Imperium or opportunistic Alliance remnants. For the galaxy as a whole, the unification of the Xenos, even temporarily, marks a turning point. It proves that cooperation among disparate factions is possible, challenging the long-held notion that the galaxy's destiny is one of eternal conflict. Whether this lesson is heeded or ignored remains to be seen, but the legacy of the Xenos Alliance will linger, shaping the course of galactic history for millennia to come. The war, regardless of its outcome, leaves the galaxy scarred and changed, its future more uncertain than ever. A unique and often debated aspect of a united Xenos alliance revolves around the unprecedented combination of their diverse technologies and tactical approaches. The galaxy's alien species have each developed technologies and strategies tailored to their unique needs, environments, and philosophies. The hypothetical fusion of these capabilities raises intriguing questions about the kind of war machines, weapons, and tactics such an alliance could produce, as well as how they might redefine interstellar conflict. One of the most tantalizing possibilities is the melding of Eldar and Necron technologies. These two ancient races have some of the most advanced and enigmatic tools in the galaxy, yet their approaches are diametrically opposed. Eldar rely on Wraithbone, a psychically attuned material shaped by thought and will, while Necrons employ hypermaterial sciences, manipulating quantum mechanics and utilizing living metal. If combined, the result could be war machines capable of self-repairing through both psychic energy and nanotechnology, making them nearly indestructible. Such hybrid creations could blur the line between science and sorcery, challenging even the most advanced defenses. Another intriguing concept is the integration of Tau precision with Orc improvisation. The Tau's meticulous designs and advanced targeting systems have long been a hallmark of their combat strategy, but they often lack the chaotic unpredictability that characterizes Orc warfare. By incorporating Orc ingenuity, despite its crude appearance, into their armory, the Tau could produce weapons and vehicles with unexpected versatility. For example, imagine Tau battlesuit enhanced with Orc scrap technology, creating machines that are not only efficient but also capable of adapting to battlefield conditions in ways traditional Tau engineering cannot. Conversely, Orcs equipped with Tau upgrades could unleash mayhem on an entirely new scale. The Xenos Alliance would also likely revolutionize communication and coordination on the battlefield. The Tau's reliance on drone-based networks and the Eldar's psychic links could be combined into a system that enables instantaneous, galaxy-spanning coordination. Such a system would allow Allied forces to react to threats in real time, deploying reinforcements or altering strategies without the delays inherent to conventional communication methods. This level of synchronization could outmatch even the Imperium's most organized campaigns, as the Alliance effectively functions as a single cohesive entity. Tactical innovation would also extend to biological warfare. The Tyranids, masters of genetic manipulation, could be encouraged or coerced into engineering specialized bioforms tailored to support Allied factions. For instance, Tyranid organisms designed to repair Eldar wraithbone or augment Orc physiology could serve as living tools on the battlefield. Such creatures might also act as symbiotic units, enhancing the abilities of Allied soldiers while maintaining the Tyranids' biological superiority. The ethical and logistical challenges of controlling these bioforms would be immense, but the potential advantages could not be ignored. The shared logistical infrastructure of a united Xenos front would also present fascinating challenges and opportunities. The diverse dietary and environmental needs of each species would necessitate the development of universal support systems capable of sustaining all factions. This might lead to innovations in resource management, such as self-replicating supply units or bioengineered ecosystems capable of producing sustenance for multiple species simultaneously. Such advancements could have far-reaching implications beyond warfare, potentially addressing long-standing issues of scarcity and survival in the galaxy. The philosophical and cultural exchanges within the Alliance could also give rise to unique strategies and tactics. The Tau's collectivist ideals might clash with the Orcs' anarchic tendencies, yet the fusion of these philosophies could result in unconventional but highly effective approaches to warfare. Similarly, the Eldar's reliance on predictive seers could be enhanced by Necron logic algorithms, creating a strategic planning system capable of forecasting enemy movements with unparalleled accuracy. These combinations would force each faction to rethink its traditional methods, fostering an environment of creativity and adaptation. Among fans, one of the most discussed aspects of such a scenario is how the Alliance would approach the warp and its dangers. While the Eldar are intimately familiar with the perils of chaos, and the Necrons despise its corruptive influence, other factions like the Orcs and Tyranids have little direct concern for the Imperium's complexities. The unification of these perspectives could lead to new ways of combating chaos. Imagine an Eldar Necron hybrid weapon designed to sever warp entities from real space permanently, or Tyranid bioforms engineered to consume and neutralize warp energy. Such innovations could potentially shift the balance of power in the eternal struggle against chaos, giving the Xenos Alliance a decisive edge. The broader implications of these technological and tactical advancements would be felt across the galaxy. Even factions not directly involved in the Alliance would be forced to adapt to the new status quo, incorporating elements of these innovations into their own arsenals or facing obsolescence. For the Imperium, this might mean a desperate attempt to reverse engineer Xenos technology, despite its long-standing prohibition against such practices. For smaller, neutral factions, it could present opportunities to leverage these advancements for their own survival or profit. This fusion of Xenos' capabilities and philosophies represents one of the most intriguing elements of their hypothetical unification. It offers a vision of what the galaxy could achieve if its species worked together, even under the shadow of conflict, and challenges the assumption that their differences are insurmountable. At the same time, it underscores the complexity and fragility of such an endeavor, as the very diversity that makes the Alliance powerful could also sow the seeds of its eventual downfall. The Xenos Alliance, unprecedented in its scale and complexity, would rely heavily on individuals who embody the ideals, strengths, and ambitions of their respective factions. These figures, drawn from vastly different cultures and philosophies, would serve as the driving forces behind the Coalition's actions. Each leader, visionary, or warrior would bring unique qualities that both elevate and challenge the Alliance's cohesion. From the Tau Empire, one of the central figures would likely be an ethereal of unparalleled charisma and strategic vision. This leader, fully devoted to the greater good, would serve as a unifying voice within the Alliance, tirelessly working to mediate disputes and align divergent goals. Their ability to inspire loyalty and cooperation among the Tau and their allies would make them an indispensable part of the Coalition. However, their unwavering belief in the Tau's ideology could create friction with other factions, particularly those unwilling to subordinate their own interests. The Eldar's contribution to the Alliance's leadership would likely come in the form of an experienced Farseer. This psychic guide, with centuries of knowledge and unparalleled foresight, would serve as a strategic linchpin. Their ability to predict enemy movements and identify future threats would be invaluable in coordinating the Alliance's operations. Yet, their arrogance and tendency to view other species as tools rather than equals could strain relationships within the Coalition. Despite these challenges, their focus on the long-term survival of the Eldar, and by extension the Alliance, would ensure their continued influence. For the Necrons, a powerful overlord or cryptech would emerge as a pivotal figure. The Overlord's strategic genius and commanding presence would make them an invaluable military leader, orchestrating complex operations with cold precision. Alternatively, a cryptech specializing in technology and innovation could spearhead the integration of Necron advancements into the Alliance's arsenal, creating weapons and defenses previously thought impossible. While their contributions would be crucial, the Necrons' disdain for organic life and their history of domination could lead to mistrust and tension with other factions. The Orcs, despite their chaotic and often unpredictable nature, would likely produce a war boss capable of rallying their kind under the banner of the Alliance. This figure would represent the raw power and unrelenting aggression that the Orcs bring to the Coalition. Their charisma and battlefield prowess would inspire not only their own warbands, but also provide a critical morale boost to the broader Alliance. However, their lack of strategic subtlety and insatiable desire for conflict could lead to reckless actions that jeopardize carefully laid plans. Among the Tyranids, a unique bioform or synaptic leader could emerge as a focal point for their integration into the Alliance. This entity, whether a hive tyrant or a specially engineered organism, would serve as a bridge between the Tyranid swarms and the Coalition. Its ability to adapt and respond to the needs of allied factions would make it an invaluable asset in both combat and logistical operations. However, its instinctual drive to consume and evolve could create a constant undercurrent of tension as other factions remain wary of the Tyranids' true intentions. The Kroot, ever opportunistic, might contribute a shaper of extraordinary cunning and adaptability to the Alliance. This leader, skilled in navigating the complexities of interspecies diplomacy, would serve as a mediator and problem solver. Their ability to adapt to new circumstances and extract value from every situation would make them indispensable in maintaining the cohesion of the Coalition. However, their mercenary nature and shifting loyalties could lead to questions about their long-term reliability. The Drukhari, despite their reputation for cruelty and self-interest, might find a leader among their ranks willing to act as a liaison with the broader alliance. This figure, likely a cunning archon or witch, would represent the Drukhari's capacity for precision and ruthless efficiency. Their contributions would come in the form of surgical strikes and psychological warfare, exploiting their expertise in causing chaos and fear. However, their duplicitous nature and penchant for betrayal would make them a constant wildcard within the coalition. For smaller factions like the Hrud or Vespid, their leaders would play less prominent but still critical roles. A Hrud seer, with their unique understanding of entropy and temporal mechanics, might serve as an advisor on unconventional strategies. Meanwhile, a Vespid leader could enhance battlefield coordination through their innate hive mind abilities, acting as a bridge between the Tau and less technologically inclined factions. These individuals, each embodying the essence of their species, would shape the Xenos Alliance's character and effectiveness. Their strengths, be it strategic brilliance, raw power, or adaptability, would drive the coalition's success. Yet, their weaknesses, arrogance, mistrust, and conflicting priorities would pose constant challenges. The interplay of these figures within the Alliance would determine not only the coalition's immediate actions, but also its long-term viability as a force capable of reshaping the galaxy. The prospect of a united Xenos alliance raises numerous unresolved questions and theories that fuel ongoing debate among scholars, strategists, and enthusiasts. These uncertainties explore the practical, philosophical, and even existential implications of such an alliance, pushing the boundaries of what is conceivable in a galaxy defined by its chaos and conflict. One of the most significant debates centers on the sustainability of the alliance itself. Many question whether a coalition formed out of necessity could endure once the immediate threat that united it is neutralized. Each Xenos faction has deeply ingrained cultural and ideological differences that might resurface once the pressure of survival diminishes. Would the alliance fracture into competing blocks, with factions vying for dominance, or could it evolve into a more permanent entity? This question highlights the inherent fragility of unity in a galaxy where betrayal and rivalry are often the norm. Another widely discussed theory focuses on the potential involvement of chaos. The warp, with its ever-present influence, represents a unique threat to any endeavor that seeks to impose order and cohesion. Could chaos gods like Tzeentch exploit the Alliance's internal tensions to sow discord, turning the factions against one another? Some speculate that the Alliance might become a target of chaos simply because of its unified nature, as such cooperation challenges the inherent chaos of the galaxy. Conversely, others argue that the Alliance could develop new methods to resist chaos, drawing on the combined strengths of the Eldar, Necrons, and other factions to forge unprecedented anti-warp technologies or strategies. The role of the Tyranids in this hypothetical scenario is another contentious point. Some theorists argue that the Tyranids, as an inherently predatory species, could never truly align with others without an external force controlling them. However, others suggest that their biological adaptability might allow for temporary cooperation under specific conditions, especially if the hive mind perceives survival benefits in such a strategy. The question remains, could the Tyranids' instinctual hunger be tempered, or would their presence always pose an existential threat to their allies? The ethical and moral dilemmas of such an alliance also invite significant scrutiny. The Imperium of man's propaganda paints all Xenos as irredeemably evil, and while this view is often simplistic and self-serving, it is not entirely unfounded. Many Xenos factions, such as the Drukhari and Orcs, have histories of unthinkable atrocities. Would the members of the Alliance be willing to set aside their differences to work alongside such entities, knowing their histories? More importantly, would these factions be capable of reform, or would their inclusion compromise the moral foundation of the coalition? A closely related question concerns the role of humanity in the aftermath of such an alliance. While the Imperium would likely resist the coalition with every resource at its disposal, what happens to human populations that fall under the Alliance's control? Would they be subjugated, exterminated, or assimilated into a new galactic order? This uncertainty raises significant ethical considerations, as well as practical questions about the ability of the Alliance to manage the vast number of humans spread across the galaxy. The possibility of technological convergence within the Alliance also generates speculation. Could the shared knowledge and resources of the Coalition lead to a new golden age of innovation? Or would the inherent differences in how each species approaches technology prevent meaningful collaboration? Some theorists propose that the Alliance might unlock forgotten secrets of the galaxy, such as the long-lost technologies of the Old Ones or the mysteries of the Webway. However, others caution that the blending of such disparate systems might create unforeseen vulnerabilities, potentially leading to catastrophic failures. Another unresolved issue involves the perception of the Alliance by neutral or unaffiliated species. Would smaller factions and independent civilizations view the Coalition as a beacon of hope or a looming threat? Some argue that the Alliance could serve as a unifying force for the galaxy's disparate species, bringing stability to regions long plagued by conflict. Others suggest that it might provoke fear and resistance, driving neutral factions to align with the Imperium or other hostile forces to counterbalance the Coalition's growing power. The ultimate goal of the Alliance also remains a topic of debate. While survival and mutual defense might serve as initial motivations, the long-term vision of the Coalition is far less clear. Would the Alliance strive for galactic peace, attempting to create a lasting order in the midst of chaos? Or would it fall victim to the same cycles of conquest and domination that have defined the galaxy for millennia? Some theorists propose that the Coalition could adopt a decentralized structure, allowing each faction to maintain its autonomy while working toward shared objectives. Others believe that true unity would require a centralized authority, potentially leading to internal power struggles. Finally, the question of legacy looms large. Even if the Alliance were to succeed in its immediate goals, what impact would it leave on the galaxy? Would it inspire future generations to pursue unity, or would its inevitable challenges serve as a cautionary tale against such efforts? The cultural and historical significance of such an event would ripple across the galaxy, shaping the narratives and ideologies of countless civilizations for millennia to come. These unresolved questions and competing theories highlight the complexity of imagining a united Xenos alliance. They delve into the heart of what defines the galaxy and its inhabitants, offering endless opportunities for exploration and debate. Whether viewed as a thought experiment or a possible future, the idea of Xenos unity continues to capture the imagination of those who ponder the grim darkness of the far future. The long-term consequences of a united Xenos alliance, regardless of the ultimate outcome of their struggle against the Imperium of Man, would ripple through the galaxy for millennia, fundamentally altering its political, cultural, and existential trajectory. This transformation would shape the future of all species, whether directly involved in the Alliance or observing from the fringes. If the Xenos Alliance achieves victory, their immediate dominance would usher in an era of dramatic change, but the unity forged under duress might prove difficult to sustain. The Coalition's success would be a double-edged sword. While it would establish a precedent for cooperation in a galaxy defined by division, it would also expose the Alliance to internal fractures as the necessity of survival fades. Each faction would likely seek to prioritize its own goals in the aftermath, risking the Coalition's disintegration. For the Tau, victory could reinforce their ideology of the greater good as a viable model for galactic governance. They might push to establish a centralized, multi-species empire, offering integration and coexistence under their terms. While this approach could provide stability, it would also risk alienating other factions, particularly those with a deep-seated mistrust of hierarchical systems. The Eldar, for instance, might resist any attempts to subordinate their ancient traditions to a unified structure, instead striving to rebuild their lost empire within the Coalition's framework. The Orcs, whose motivations are often tied to war and conflict, would likely present one of the greatest challenges to long-term unity. With no common enemy to focus their aggression, Orc warbands might revert to their natural state of infighting, threatening the fragile stability of the Coalition. Attempts to direct their energy toward constructive goals, such as exploration or infrastructure, might yield mixed results, as Orc ingenuity is as unpredictable as it is powerful. The Necrons, ever pragmatic, would likely leverage their technological superiority to secure key territories and resources, prioritizing their own survival over the Coalition's broader goals. This approach could lead to tensions with other factions, particularly those who view the Necrons' actions as self-serving. However, their influence might also provide a stabilizing force, as their cold logic and long-term perspective could counterbalance the more chaotic tendencies of factions like the Orcs and Drukhari. The Tyranids, if incorporated into the Alliance through manipulation or coercion, would pose an existential dilemma for their allies. Their insatiable hunger and instinctual drive for assimilation would make them a perpetual threat, even in victory. Over time, other factions might view their continued presence as untenable, leading to efforts to expel or neutralize them. This decision, however, would risk reigniting conflict within the Coalition, as some factions might see value in retaining the Tyranids as a weapon against future threats. The Drukhari, with their penchant for self-interest and cruelty, would likely exploit the chaos of the post-victory landscape to consolidate power. Their actions could destabilize the Coalition as other factions grow increasingly wary of their motives. On the other hand, their expertise in psychological warfare and subterfuge might prove invaluable in maintaining order, provided their ambitions are kept in check. The long-term impact on humanity would be profound, regardless of the Alliance's fate. If the Imperium survives in a diminished state, it would be forced to abandon its isolationist and xenophobic policies, adapting to a galaxy where cooperation with alien species becomes a necessity rather than anathema. Such a shift could lead to a more inclusive and dynamic humanity, albeit one struggling to reconcile its past with its new reality. Alternatively, if humanity is subjugated or marginalized, it might persist as a fractured and rebellious presence, influencing the galaxy through covert resistance or cultural resilience. For the galaxy at large, the Xenos Alliance's victory could herald a new era of exploration and innovation. Freed from the oppressive grip of the Imperium's rigid doctrines, species might exchange knowledge and technologies on an unprecedented scale, accelerating advancements in fields ranging from medicine to transportation. However, this newfound freedom would also come with risks, as the rapid spread of information and resources could lead to new forms of conflict and exploitation. If the Alliance ultimately collapses after its victory, the galaxy would likely enter a prolonged period of instability as former allies turn on one another in a struggle for dominance. This fragmentation could undo many of the Coalition's achievements, plunging the galaxy back into the endless cycle of war and chaos that defined it before. However, the memory of the Alliance's brief unity might inspire future generations to seek similar paths, planting the seeds for eventual reconciliation and progress. In the case of the Alliance's failure, the long-term consequences would be equally significant. The Imperium, emboldened by its victory, would likely redouble its efforts to exterminate alien life, initiating a new era of brutal purges and expansions. However, the fear of another Xenos coalition might drive humanity to adopt more aggressive strategies of surveillance and control, potentially leading to internal dissent and stagnation. For the Xenos factions, failure would reinforce the narrative that unity is impossible, deepening divisions and ensuring that future attempts at cooperation remain unlikely. Each species would retreat to its own corner of the galaxy, focusing on survival and rebuilding. However, The lessons learned from the Coalition's brief existence might still influence their strategies, encouraging more localized or temporary alliances in times of crisis. Ultimately, the long-term impact of a united Xenos alliance would depend on its ability to adapt and evolve beyond its initial purpose. Whether it becomes a lasting force for change or a fleeting anomaly, its legacy would shape the galaxy's history, proving that even in the grim darkness of the far future, unity, however fragile, is not entirely beyond reach.